Welcome to the December Monthly Market Report. My name is Mac Rogers. I'm a real estate broker here in the San Francisco Bay Area. We'll be going through some of the most important topics in real estate right now. This is our last monthly market report for 2021. I want to say quickly, just thank you for all of you that watch the monthly market report each month. My goal with these reports is to share with you what is actually going on in the real estate market on a national level, and then for my local viewers here in the Bay Area, compare it with what's going on regionally so you can make informed decisions. So to get started today, we're going to talk about what's coming up in the real estate market over the winter. To do that, I want to pose this question. The question is, when do most listings come on the market? It would be the second quarter of each year. Think of that as the spring real estate market. It's highlighted here by April, May, and June of every year. And the reality is, the market right now is anything but normal. So we're going to kind of throw out this answer of the second quarter of this year. And I'm going to make a case over the next few minutes that we'll see more listings this winter than we will any other time of the year. The reality of the pandemic and coming out of it the last couple of years is seasonality in real estate market has kind of been thrown out of the window. Let's take a look at this because this is a big point and really a point that underscores we'll see a lot more transaction this winter, maybe a lot more transactions than most people are expecting. So we'll start here with this quote. Home sellers have historically moved when something in their lives changed. A new baby, a marriage, a divorce, or a new job. This comes from Jessica Lutz, the Vice President of Demographics at NAR. And I think we know this, that life change drives decisions to make a move. She goes on to say, quote, "The pandemic has impacted everyone, and for many, this became an impetus to sell and make a housing trade." Unquote. No doubt that seasonality, all of these things that used to drive real estate still do in some respect. But the pandemic caused a lot of people to say, we need something different in our home. We need to make a different decision about our home. And we're seeing the results of that. She goes on to say, the pandemic likely spurred occupants to shorten their home stay as tenure in home decreased from 8 years. That's 8 years from 10 years, according to the report. This is important here. This is the largest single year change in home tenure since NAR started collecting such data. You know, I've been in the business long enough when we used to say somebody moved every 5 to 6 years. And that's traditionally how it was in the real estate market. But you go through the housing crisis, and after 2008, tenure in homes began to rise. What we're seeing in this new report is we're starting to see that tenure come down again. Here's what this looks like graphically. Going all the way back to 1985, you see the average of about 6 years of someone staying in their home. Go through the housing crisis, people start staying in their homes longer, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. The average just over 9 years in over 10 years. So there are a lot of good reasons for that. Coming out of the mortgage meltdown, a lot of people maybe didn't have equity to make a move. Maybe they were underwater for a while in the home that they own. Maybe they just said, you know, we're not going to do anything. We're going to try to pay this off and stay here because we saw what happened to people during the housing crisis of 2008. My experience here in the Bay Area, this is spot on. In the beginning, it was primarily because a lot of homeowners didn't have equity to be able to sell coming out of the mortgage meltdown. I think that was one of the biggest driver of people staying in their homes longer. Now, coming out of the pandemic, we're seeing that dip down. I'm certainly not saying that 1 year would make a trend by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we can say that it represents pent-up seller demand in all those years that people have stayed in their homes. We can say the meaning of home has dramatically changed. We can say there's more equity in homes today than there has been ever before. All of this leading to many people thinking, is now the time to make a move? And I do believe we'll start to see that this winter. Let's take a look at what George Ratui at Realtor.com has to say about this. Quote, "The pandemic has delayed plans for many Americans, and homeowners looking to move on to their next stage of life are no exception. Recent survey data suggests the majority of prospective sellers are actively preparing to enter the market this winter." Unquote. So going back, a lot of the reasons we just talked about, people thinking about moving, this study is saying we're seeing a lot of these people preparing to enter the market this winter. In that study, 65% said they have either just listed or plan to list this winter. 93% said they have already taken steps towards listing their homes, including working with an agent. 36% have researched the value of their home and others in their neighborhood, as well as they started making repairs or doing what they need to do to sell their home. Again, this is what I'm seeing locally. I've actually talked to a lot more sellers lately, and the biggest question that they have is not should they be selling, but rather when and what do they need to do to prepare. Danielle Hale says this: listings has rose now for the second week in a row, with the recent survey data suggesting that a growing share of homeowners and potential sellers are eager to find new homes. There is reason to believe this may be the start of a welcome trend, especially as we move into the colder months. As we look into the winter, I think we're going to see more activity among sellers and among buyers than we've seen in quite some time. And if we go back, what I said earlier, seasonality has been thrown out of the window in the real estate market coming through the pandemic. We've had 2 phenomenal years in real estate. I expect another great year next year, but I think we're going to see a lot more transactions or sales over the winter. Let's talk about interest rates. Probably one of the biggest updates or topics that's going to be talked about as we go into the new year. What's going on with interest rates? The overall outlook is interest rates are going to rise. This is a look right now at the 30-year fix. I've shared this many times over the last couple of reports. We look at January of 2020 prior to the pandemic, knocking on the door of 4%. Right now, the average 30-year fix is 3.1%. Many are calling for that to increase going to the next year. I'll show you what forecasters are saying, but if you were to ask me what's going to happen with interest rates, I think we're going to go back to where we were. This is a historical perspective on interest rates, looking at 2016, 17, 18, and 19. 4 normal years in real estate, and we average somewhere between 3.5% and 5%. This is where I believe we're headed back. We're going to a much more normal interest rate environment. We've seen some phenomenal rates over the last year or so, and expect that we head back into a time where we were prior to the pandemic. Many people oftentimes ask, what's the impact of rising rates on home prices, home sales, and all of those things? And if rates are going to rise, is that going to mean we're not going to sell as many homes? Now take a look at this research. It's a look at the impact of rising interest rate environment in home prices and home sales. The first one, home prices are slightly impacted by rising mortgage rate. This is a look going all the way back to 2000, and what you see in the line graph there is the interest rate, and what you see in the bar graph, that's appreciation or depreciation during the housing crisis. The quick thing I want to point out here is that each rising interest rate environment, there's no depreciation except during that housing crisis. And we see when you start to look at rising interest rate environments, the first one around 2005, less appreciation in 2006. You look at 2012, 13, and 14, rising interest rate environment, less appreciation the last year. The next one, in 16, 17, and 18, we go up and we come back down a little bit. So a slight impact on home price appreciation. Price appreciation though, as we look at that, is resistant to rising mortgage rate. And here's why. Mark Fleming sums it up best. Quote, home price appreciation is resistant to rising mortgage rates primarily because most sellers would rather withdraw from the market than sell at lower prices, a phenomenon we refer to as downside sticky. So somebody's going to say, okay, if we can't get as much for our home, or if our home is not appreciating as fast, we'll just take it off the market. That's what Mark is saying here. The bottom line is that we don't see depreciation in the market, but we do see price slightly impacted by rising interest rates. The other question is home sales. Are they impacted by rising interest rates? Well, if you go back all the way back to 1999, which is what you see in this graphic, where we have interest rates in the line graph and home sales in the bar graph, we can see home sales aren't impacted by rising mortgage rates. You can see here on the screen, each one of the red bars being rising interest rate environment, and they're not corresponding with lower home sales. So if you're thinking interest rates are rising, that's going to mean we're going to sell less homes or home prices will be impacted. The question I would have for somebody who's thinking this way is, based on what information? Now, I don't know how much this will affect the rest of the country, but I believe here in the Bay Area, we can absorb, if you will, interest rates up to 4.5%. The reason being is that, and I kind of cringe when I say this, There's so much money in this region. Our economy is amazing. I can't begin to tell you how many buyers I know that have 20, 30, 40% or more, and even cash buyers that continue to lose out on homes or not get homes at all. And when we get to the higher interest rate environment, these buyers will simply up their down payments to be able to absorb that higher interest rate. So going back to what I was saying about rising interest rate not affecting sales and prices historically, it just doesn't prove it. Because the bottom line here is context matters right now for the housing market and certainly for purchase demand. The economy is improving. Millennials are continuing to age into their prime home buying years in large numbers. So the context remains good for the housing market. I think overall, we can expect a rising interest rate environment going into next year. I don't see that affecting the housing market dramatically. For sure, it will cost more to buy a home next year. Let's look at what the experts are forecasting for interest rates. This is an outlook from the 4 leading providers that I follow: Fannie Mae, Freddie, MBA, and NAR. And what are they saying? Sometime between the middle and the end of next year, forecasting between 3.5% and 4% on the average 30-year fix. Now, I'm not here today with a crystal ball to say that this is what the interest rates are going to be by any stretch of the imagination. But I am here to say I think we can expect a rising interest rate environment, and you should be aware of that if you're thinking of buying next year. Let's talk about home price forecast. A lot of people are asking what's going to happen in the housing next year. I'm concerned that, here we go again. Home prices are going sky high. Well, forecasters are calling for 5.1 on average. 5.1% appreciation in housing next year, and you see anywhere from 7.5% to almost 3% appreciation on the low side. This is a direct nod to seeing more inventory come in the market. The price will always be dictated by supply and demand in any market. The other question that starts and come up and is on people's mind is the housing market going to crash? I'm concerned about what I've seen, the forbearance, and all the things that we know that's happening in the real estate industry. The bottom line here is that housing sales are forecasted to increase this year and outperform again next year. Last year in 2020, we sold 6.5 million homes in this country. We're forecasted to sell more than that this year and more than that again next year. This slide here always does a great job to show just where we're at in the real estate market based on months of inventory in the extreme sellers market that we're in. Thinking about selling your home, there's literally never been a better time. And sometimes I feel like I'm a broken record. I keep on saying this over and over. This graphic just underscores it. Going all the way back to 1999. What does the market look like? And it's been a great seller's market for those that have decided to sell. Last question that I'll address on these slides are for buyers. The buyer that says, I don't know if I want to buy at the top of the market, which if you look at price appreciation forecasts, it's certainly not the top of the market, but that's the feeling that most people have. Take a look at what's forecasted for appreciation. So looking at this, if you ask me, when is the best time to buy a home or upgrade to a new home? I would say that would be right now. Look, if it's expensive now, take a look at the forecast. It's not getting any cheaper. This is the latest survey based on this year all the way through 2026. An average price home, if you don't buy now, not only will you be paying more later, but if you look at it the other way, you're actually losing out on appreciation. Over $111,000 in real appreciation over the next 5 years. You have to keep this in mind if you're thinking of buying. This is what's at stake here. This is a good time to go out and go buy a home. We see things in the news, we hear things in the news, we hear about our neighbor that sold their house, and we wonder, should we be buying? Should you be selling? The market is healthy and it's still forecasted to be healthy. Now here in the Bay Area, I believe that we're looking at easily double-digit appreciation again. In the places and neighborhoods that are highly attractive or sought after, I wouldn't be surprised if we go above 15% again. Last month, the median home price in Contra Costa County for all types of properties was $799,000. That's up 8% by the way. If we increase another 15% next year, that $799,000 is now $918,500. If you think that's bad, Alameda County median home prices last month was $1,060,000, up a big 15%. Now, if next year we go up another 15%, That 1,060,000 is now a whopping 1,219,000. Lastly, some people will bring up inflation. Yes, that is a concern. I think the latest I saw inflation was around 6%. I'm not going to go through the whole inflation scenario, but here's one thing I know. Getting a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage, is a hedge on inflation. Think about it. Your monthly housing payments will never change. If you are a renter, good luck. Rents are increasing every year. Hey, that's our monthly market report for 2021. I have some free resources that you can download. Check the description below. These are the winter 2022 buyer and seller guides. Let's enjoy the rest of the year with our loved ones. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and thank you that we are still here living in this great country of ours.